It is, it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Belinda Mckee.
Thanks. It's really wonderful to be here again this year. And for those of you who know Peter, he sends his greetings. He wasn't able to make it this year, but I just wanted to pass those on. Grevy zebra is one of Africa's most endangered large mammals. In the 1970s, there were 15,000 Grevy zebras. Today, there are only just over 2,500. The threats facing Grevy zebras are habitat loss, limited access to water, and poaching. And if we don't address those threats, if we're not successful in addressing those threats, Grevy zebra will continue to decline, and they will face extinction in the wild. So it's going to take all of us to really make their conservation a success. This map shows you a map of the Horn of Africa, and their former range was the pale shaded area. So they were extensively in Somalia, also going up into Djibouti and Eritrea, and a large part of Ethiopia. But you can see how their range has actually shrunk now down into that dark black area. So the majority of Grevy zebra are found in Kenya, with a few small populations in Ethiopia. Grevy zebra are specially adapted to survive in arid environments. So there's permanent water in those areas, but it's very dry. And their social system has evolved in that way. So the males, the most effective way for them to mate with females is to establish territories with grazing and water resources in those territories. And then the females come looking for the grazing in the water, and that's the opportunity for breeding. I'm showing you this mother trying to drag her foal away from a lion. And they have an amazing bond, the mother and the foal. A female is pregnant for 13 months. So you can imagine it takes a really long time for the species to increase and recover. So what's the difference between the plain zebra and the Grevy zebra? Well, you can see that the Grevy's is really a lot bigger, and very fine stripes, beautiful big ears. That's their most enduring feature, and one that everybody remembers. And also they have brown noses and these beautiful soft white bellies. And in Samburu they're called loibur korum, and that refers to the white rump on the dorsal stripe, because it shines in the sunlight, so you can see it from a long way away. Grevy zebra live with communities. 99% of their range is in community-owned land. And so we work with communities. 94% of our team is employed from communities within Grevy zebra range, because it's really important to us that the people own what we are doing. This is a photo of Subanya Lekupe. And it was his son that told me his story. And it's just a lovely story about coexistence, and I wanted to share it with you. So when Subanya was a young warrior, there was a very bad drought. This was probably about 50 years ago. And so he'd taken his cattle up into the mountains. But he realized that actually, the forage was disappearing. And so he thought, I've got to go and find forage. So off he went. And he found some Grevy zebra tracks. And he followed them, and he found a permanent water source. And he goes, okay, I found some water. He then followed the tracks away from the water and arrived at some plains. And the Grevy zebra were grazing in those plains. So he went back, got his cattle, and he lived there for 6 months next to those Grevy zebra. It was just him, the Grevy zebra, and his cattle. And they developed this lovely relationship where he would go to water with his cattle, the Grevy zebra would follow the cattle, and then they would come back together. And at some point, the water table dropped, this drought was continuing. And so he ended up actually putting water out for the Grevies. So he helped them to survive that drought. And he was able to get married because he used his cattle for a dowry. So it was a lovely story. And it also shows that Grevy zebra have the same needs as the people that they share the land with. They need Grevy zebra need grazing, they need access to water, and they need peace and security. And so that's what really the 3 pillars of our work are, and what we're working with those communities to achieve. And that will ensure a sustainable future for people in the region. I'm going to talk a little bit about our community-based programs. This is Helena, one of our Grevy zebra scouts. So our scout program focuses on empowering women in conservation. And the reason being is that women are mothers, and they are the people that teach their children right from wrong. And so it's a really powerful way of distilling that value and that ethic into the family and then into the wider community. And it's also had a very significant socio-economic impact on the women's lives. They've been uplifted within their community. They now have a voice. They're involved in decision making. And their income has helped them put their kids through school. These scouts collect data on Grevy zebra sightings, and we've been doing this for several years now, and we've been able to see the trends in what's happening. And we analyzed this year the last 7 years' worth of data, and we saw that during drought years, Grevy zebra numbers really drop. And that's probably a combination of Grevy zebra dispersing out of the area, so they're not being seen as much by the scouts, but also high mortality, because we also record mortality, and that increases during very bad drought periods. But one interesting thing is, in the year that we recently, it was in 2011, we decided to feed the Grevy zebra before they started dying. And you can see from the scouts' data that that intervention actually helped the numbers to stay stable instead of declining. We've got a really exciting program that we started this year, and this is the manufacture of reusable sanitary pads. So many of you probably don't realize that women in Samburu don't have, hygienic options available to them. And for girls, this is quite serious because they actually have to drop out of school for a week every month, and so their grades really suffer. And so in order to provide an alternative enterprise for the women, but at the same time help women in the community and girls stay in school, we've started this reusable sanitary pad program. And the women are absolutely, they can't believe that it's happened, and they're so excited about expanding it. So at the moment, we're piloting the model and hoping to scale that up next year. I'm now going to move to one of our areas where this is a day's drive from where the scouts have been operating, and resources in this area are abundant. So you can see that the grazing is fantastic. However, there is not a lot of wildlife there, and the reason being there is a huge amount of firearms in that area. So what we've got is a team of Grevy zebra ambassadors, 16 of them. They've been trained in anti-poaching, but they've also been trained in building trust with the communities that they're working with. And this is a picture of Micho. And he has an incredible level of trust with his community. And as a result of that, he gets intelligence. People come to him and say, look, so-and-so is going to go and poach, Grevies. And so he gathers the elders, and then they go and discipline that person. They usually fine them with a livestock fine. And having that grassroots kind of law enforcement is so effective in stopping poaching. This is just a photo to show you, how many guns there are. This is just some people that, Ricapo, who's here today, there, he works in this region. So he took a photograph of this group that he was talking to about Grevy zebra when he was in the field. But you can just see the number of firearms that are out there. And Grevy zebra is a big animal, and so it's an easy target for people that have arms. And now we're moving to a very arid area called Lysamus. And this area has good grazing available, but it has very scarce water. And so because it's a vast area as well, we have used the warriors in the communities to help us conserve grevies. This is a photo of Lekurea, and in his community, he actually has moved a whole village out of the corridor that was on the way for Grevy zebra to reach water. And so he and his colleague worked together to convince the community to move their whole manyatta. And then kids were playing in the dry riverbed at night, and they had torches, so they were like trying to scare the grevies. And it was just a game, but you know, this kind of thing has a huge impact because the grevies have come all the way to the water and then they can't actually drink because they're, you know, nervous of the torches. So these kinds of behavior changes are so critical for us to succeed in saving grevies. This year, the warriors got cameras, so they're now able to photograph and document their work, and it's really empowered them because not only are they taking great photos of Grevy zebra and the other wildlife that they see, but they're also taking social pictures, you know, just of their lives and what they get up to as conservation warriors. And it's a very empowering tool for them. And for us, it's a great way of verifying what they're actually seeing in these really remote areas. So this is a photo taken by Hargura out on a hill, and we never would have known that those grevies were up there, you know, if we hadn't had the cameras and the warriors patrolling in those areas. They also take photographs of water sources, so we're able to monitor the status of water and grazing and then know when we should intervene and manage water. And we have two new team members. This is Deki, and then in the background is Gabre, and those are our two new camels who have joined the team. And the reason we have enlisted the help of camels is because the Grevy zebra in the dry season, they disperse into these lava plateaus. I mean, you can't reach them. You can only get there on foot. And you know, there's no water around there. So in order to have their supplies with them and be able to be out for a couple of weeks at a time, the camels, Deki and Gabre, are carrying their supplies. So they're actually on their first camel patrol. This is a very new program. And last week they saw 76 Grevy zebra in one day. So we're so excited about this. And that's just the whole team there with the camels. Yeah. So limited access to water is also another threat to Grevy zebra. And you know, we are working in an area where it's extremely arid, water resources are scarce, and the pressure on water you know, is huge because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of livestock, and there's wildlife. So everybody needs water. And in community-owned areas, water is dominated by people during the day. So Grevy zebra use these water sources at night. But when we have very bad droughts, we also have livestock using the water at night. So you have Grevy zebra that have walked for, you know, about 20 kilometers in some cases. They get to the water, and then they can't actually drink. And that's when we really have a high mortality, because it particularly affects foals and their mothers. And so, you know, the females, in order to lactate and produce milk, they have to drink at least every other day. And so if they're not able to access water on a regular basis, you know, they can't lactate, and therefore the foals unfortunately die. So in the short term, what we're doing is working with our teams, our scouts, our ambassadors, and our warriors to ensure that there's always water available in areas where we know there are high populations of Grevy zebra. But in the long term, and this is happening as we speak, we want to be able to provide sustainable water. And this is a sand dam. So basically with a sand dam, you build a wall across a dry riverbed. And then after several rainy seasons, the rain comes, washes down and deposits sand behind the wall. And in between those sand particles, you harvest water. And so you actually create a lot more water. So in this area, we're building one sand dam dedicated just for wildlife and for Grevy zebra. And then the other two sand dams are for the community, so that everybody benefits and has a long-term water supply. Habitat loss is probably the most widespread and serious threat facing Grevy zebra today. And that's loss of plants in the landscape, and that's because overgrazing is taking place. People are not moving like they used to. They're no longer as nomadic as they were. And that's because we have schools and clinics and hospitals, permanent infrastructure, and so settlements are congregating around that permanent infrastructure. But as a result, the system has kind of, stopped moving like it used to. So when it rains, we're expecting El Nino, just like here in California, which means a lot of heavy rain. And when it hits the bare ground, we're going to lose 80% of it. It's going to run off and it's going to evaporate. So we're really not going to capture the rain we get. And we do have rain, it's just we're not capturing it. So we have these cycles of drought, but really they're actually man-made because we have bare soil. So we need to cover this soil. And the best tool that we can use, we have a lot of these tools in the landscape, is livestock. Livestock is brilliant at tilling soil. So you can treat bare ground with the enclosures, having livestock sleeping in the enclosures for a week. At night, each night they go in, they sleep there, they dung in it, they urinate in it, so you've fertilized it. You've broken it up, so when it rains, the water is going to sink in. And so we're working with communities to pilot this approach, and we really want to scale this approach up. I just want to demonstrate one of the other principles, and that's about recovery time. Imagine this is a piece of land, okay? And you've got livestock all over it 365 days of the year. Grass is never going to get any recovery time here because they can graze every day of the year. We now decide, okay, why don't we graze half of it for 6 months, and then we'll move to the other half. So now we're providing 6 months of recovery time to one half of that area of land. And if we decide to break it down even further, we're now getting 270 days worth of recovery time in those areas where the cattle are not concentrated. And so also by concentrating them into a smaller area, you're also increasing the impact they have on the soil. So it's these two principles that we're working with to try and heal land. And this is a photograph of a kind of before photograph and an after photograph. And to me, there's nothing more rewarding than walking through a field where I knew it was bare and feeling grass in my fingers. It's just a joy. And then the added joy to that is that you see Grevy zebra move into the area with foals. So what we need to do for people and for Grevy zebra is to scale this up and to make this work across a large area. We are extremely fortunate this year to have built a camp. We actually have a home. And it's thanks to some very generous donors through WCN that we were able to achieve this. And it's a real novelty now, being able to stand up in a tent. But it's not just that kind of luxury, it's also the fact that we have a base, we have a central base that we can operate from. It's strengthened our operations. We can have interns and researchers staying with us. So it's just allowed us to really improve our operations and just become that, take our work to the next level. And we were lucky enough to have a celebration this year as well of opening the camp. So this is one of the elders blessing the camp, and this is milk being sprayed all over our mess area. And ladies, singing. It was very festive, a lot of singing and dancing. And we also had a really nice ceremony of giving out medals to Grevy zebra heroes. And so those heroes are people in the community that have really gone out of their way to help Grevy zebra completely voluntarily. And it was wonderful to hear the stories coming in from the community. So I became a mother this year. And this is my daughter with Leah Rapper, one of our Grevy zebra warriors. And motherhood, it just has really reinforced to me that what we're doing is critical. We need to provide a future in which wildlife can thrive. We need to provide a future in which communities can thrive. We need to provide a future in which this Grevy zebra foal can live a full and productive life. And we have to get it right. We can't afford not to do this. You know, the Grevy zebra is a reflection of ecosystem health. If the Grevy zebra continues to decline, the whole ecosystem will collapse. So consider supporting this amazing initiative, please. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank everybody in this room who has contributed to us, to make us so successful. And we need to continue this work. It's really critical. It's critical for our planet. It's critical for Grevies. It's critical for people. So I'd like to recognize thank you. I'd like to just say a big thank you to all our supporters. It really has meant a huge amount to us, and we couldn't do what we do without you. Thanks.